Joining me is the local member, the member for Chifley and Shadow Minister for Industry, Ed Husic. Mr Husic, thanks for your time. We'll get to the issue about the walk-in clinic where you are this morning. I want to ask you about the submarine matter, though. This morning, Peter Dutton has spoken to Andrew Keneally. He said that one of the reasons they couldn't go ahead with the French Barracuda nuclear sub is because the Labor Party wouldn't support a domestic nuclear industry. So pinning some of the responsibility on Labor, what do you make of that today?
Of course, it's the truism when it comes to the coalition that when they make a decision, big announcement that starts to basically unravel, the first thing they do is try and shift responsibility to someone else. That is the constant with them. They never accept responsibility, never accountability. The reality is this: these are important decisions nationally. I think Australians get that these type of decisions, particularly when it comes to areas of national security, have to be thought about deeply, taken seriously by both the government and the opposition. So I think they get that. The big issue here is that there'll be a lot of people that, while they respect the importance of this decision, will also wonder about a government like the Coalition being able to deliver. Because it's worth noting, they stuffed up the bushfire response, they couldn't order vaccines, they couldn't manage the last submarine project that blew out in cost and time, and now they're saying they can deliver a nuclear sub-program. I think a lot of people will be sceptical about their ability to achieve just that.
Peter Dutton denies that there was a backstabbing or misleading of the French. He says the government's been upfront about it. Do you accept that? And does Labor maintain its support for this overall architecture, even though we are seeing a few reverberations?
Labor absolutely agrees and supports and will always prosecute the case to ensure that the Australian Defence Force has the equipment that it's required, or that is required, to ensure it can do its job on behalf of Australia and working with allies and allied nations or aligned nations. That's very important, point one. Second, I think if you look at the reaction we have seen in the aftermath of this decision from countries like France, who understandably would be concerned deeply about the impact on them. If the roles were reversed, we would do exactly the same. The concern that's been expressed in different parts of the region, or the fact that it's been acknowledged there was very little consultation about this. The New Zealanders, I think, have indicated that. Indonesia is not going ahead with planned meetings with the Prime Minister. Malaysia has come out and expressed concern. Sure, we've had countries like Japan speak up in favour of this. But the point is this: you can have the best military hardware in the world, but complex issues, geopolitical issues like the ones that we're facing in our region right now, require cooperation. They require patience. They require a commitment to work with other nations. And I don't think that this government's really got a track record that they can boast about here. And the reaction in the last 48, 72 hours indicates that there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
There's going to be a transition period, of course, with the workforce. Your minister, Shadow Minister for Industry, how many potential jobs will be lost in Adelaide over this?
The scale of those job losses potentially is a big question and a massive concern. We had, for instance, with this government, when they first announced this project, they boasted that it would be overwhelmingly, I think it was something like 90% local content, and then that got down to 60%, and now we've had this whole project scrapped. You've seen businesses that are involved currently who are wondering what will happen with them and are deeply concerned about that. Obviously the workers as well will be wondering what happens because of the delay in the actual start of construction as well, not to put it as well, the whole cancellation of the project. And so it's that whole valley of death issue that people are worried about. And also, I think we have to be concerned about the international impact. What does this say to businesses that want to work with Australia that see the way in which governments make decisions like this suddenly? Because even Naval Group, I think, have expressed some concern around this, and the French had no inkling, based on their face-to-face discussions with the Prime Minister, that this would occur. So I think that's disturbing. And finally, I might make this point. just look at the scale of money that this government spends and the lack of checks and balances on it. I mean, we have gone from, if you look at things like JobKeeper, 13 billion going to firms with rising revenues, to the future submarine project that went from 50 billion to 90 billion. We've gone from the waste in JobKeeper to the loss of money in sub-cash leaker, and this government doesn't seem perturbed by that at all. And yet, at the time we need them to invest in communities, they're never there. So these are all big issues that the government's going to have to respond to.
As I mentioned in introducing you, you're at Chifley at a walk-in vaccination clinic. How is your community coping in the face of being one of the hotspots of this wave? And what's the vaccination take-up been like?
Our community has done it tough. Communities in Western Sydney have had to put up with quite a bit, and we do. The reality is now live in a divided city. But having said that, I am really proud of the fact that residents in our part of Western Sydney took up the challenge, got vaccinated in high numbers, and in fact we can boast some of the sharpest vaccination growth rates in the city. That wasn't always the case. And I think the turning point was in August when, in particular, pharmacies finally got supplies of vaccine. Kieran, these pharmacies were trained in some parts of this area. These pharmacies were trained in February to administer the vaccines and only got their supply in August. And once that took off, you saw those rates increase. So we've got between 80 to 90%, depending on where you go in the city of Blacktown, first dose. The second dose is lagging, and in the last week I saw figures that the first dose rate had jumped 12%, while second was at 6%, which would suggest that we've got a way to go, and that's been the lag, the impact there. So that's been an issue. It has been a struggle to get walk-in clinics like this, Kieran. It took 3,500 people in the Chifley electorate to catch COVID before the New South Wales Liberal government put this clinic in. That's just not good enough. We have to walk and work faster to do this type of stuff.
And on the reopening, we saw the revised or the latest analysis of the Doherty modelling, which shows that even at that 80% reopening, even with thousands of cases, won't see a massive spike. Would you urge state leaders, not just federal, but particularly the states with the power now to reopen, to push ahead with a reopening? Obviously Victoria and New South Wales are of that mindset, but it's a different view elsewhere.
I think that communities want to get out of lockdown. Lockdown has had a big impact on well-being. It's had a big impact on our businesses. It's had a big impact on students wanting to get their schooling done. And clearly we need to be able to move forward. The Doherty modelling was important, but what's even more important is that governments have the resources in place to manage this. We've seen federal and state governments here in New South Wales take their time on issues of vaccination. There is an issue around will hospitals be able to cope when we start to open up. Bear in mind too, you have a mass of elective surgery that has been cancelled and put off, and there are people that are putting up with a lot of pain and discomfort because of that. Now, how long that goes on for is going to be a reflection of whether or not our hospitals can manage rising case numbers once the decision is to open up further.
A couple of quick issues before you go. Christina Keneally for Fowler. Can you understand the frustration from some Labor members that they've parachuted a high-profile candidate into Western Sydney?
I think it is a terrific move to have in the House of Representatives potentially. Obviously, we've got to go through an election as well, and Christina will seek support for her election in Fowler. But it is terrific to be able to add firepower in the House in the form of Christina Keneally. She is a proven performer, a fighter, and someone who will take up the Labor cause with vigour. And I certainly welcome the prospect of her being in the House of Representatives alongside us. And frankly, I think it is a better place that is better suited for her, and I think she'll make a terrific contribution. For others that have expressed disappointment, which I understand, I've gone through pre-selections where I've lost and then won them, and I've gone through elections that I've lost and won. Politics teaches you a lot about resilience, and I think you've just got to have you've always, and I've always taken the view, where you can, you've got to take the long view.
And we're almost out of time, but your opposite number, Christian Porter, the industry minister, if he pays his own legal bills, repays that, should it be the end of the matter? Should he be allowed to move on?
No, absolutely not. You just cannot have a cabinet minister have $1 million worth of legal fees be paid anonymously through a blind trust. It's inconceivable that you could tolerate that situation. Remember, this is the coalition that hounded Sam Bastiari out for $2,000. No, I think there are big questions, and the fact that at the point at which a decision was made, the decision was made in a way to be secretive and to allow anonymous donors to do this. Now, the government keeps saying that they want to make sure that government decisions are made free of influence, and yet they can tolerate this. I just do not see how Christian Porter can stay in this role, or how the Prime Minister could tolerate and abide this situation to continue.
Ed Husic, thanks for your time.
Good on you, Kieran.